Food industry will keep doing what consumers want, and the food industry has learned very quickly from the tobacco industry how to incorporate places in your brain to make you think there's a path you can go where write you a prescription and you can leave the office and be out of here in 5 minutes, and then you'll come back in a couple months and we'll adjust your medication to be a little bit higher dose, and we'll have that conversation on and on or I can share what I've learned and how I've maintained my weight and increase my ability to run by making some lifestyle changes, which choice you want.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Vegan podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Gwyn Whittaker, who is a senior executive leader with a broad base of experience over 40 years instituting transformative change to enterprise environments in the intelligence community with high-performance technology as competitive assets. She founded the educational restaurant, the Green Fair Organic Cafe, in 2015, and the nonprofit Green Fair Health and Wellness, a 501c3, both focused on enabling health through lifestyle changes, with a successful 21-day Kickstart program that's been attended by over 1,500 senior leaders and medical professionals. With her inspiration of the documentary Forks Over Knives, she's in turn supported the making of documentaries as an executive producer in The Game Changers, Eating Our Way to Extinction, and the co-producer in Diet Fiction. She has a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, certified in plant-based nutrition through Cornell, is a Food for Life instructor with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and is in the MS Nutrition Studies program at American University. Gwyn is started and ran the Fairfax Veg Fest for 5 years and is an 8-year certified master gardener. So ultimately, Gwyn is a badass. All right, welcome to the Fit Vegan podcast. I'm your show host, Maxime Sigouin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, a company that is on a mission to help 10,000 people get lean, thrive, and reduce their risk of chronic illnesses by 2033 and 1 million by 2050. I believe that having a fit, healthy body and mind is the foundation to living an incredible life, and this is what we'll show will give you if you choose to listen and implement. Enjoy the episode and have a great day. Gwyn, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Maxine. Yeah, I'm all over the map, right?
Well, you've accomplished a lot of things. It was very fun to do some research on you before having you on the show, and people spoke very highly of you. Like I mentioned before we started recording, Chuck Carroll's only had good things to say. Robert only had good things to say, which ultimately Robert kind of made the introduction for us to be able to talk today.
I'm following in some big footsteps on your show, so I'm excited about that. And Chuck and Robert are both great people, and I've spent a lot of time with them at the at Green Fair, and then following them around in the community. So it's we have a great group of people.
Beautiful. Well, I get it's once you kind of get into that community, you realize how close everyone is, and it's just like a beautiful group of people. I'd love to get started from the start. Obviously, it's called the Fit Vegan podcast. So I'd love to ask you, what was your origin story into becoming vegan?
It's been a journey over time. I think in my teens, I connected what I was eating with cows, and I stopped eating cows in my teens, and chicken in my 20s. And it took me longer to give up seafood. I'd grown up at the beach, and I think in my 50s, I read a book called The Ethical Vegan, or it was it was the Ethics of Food Choices. I remember opening to the section on seafood, which I was still consuming, and read probably 4 to 5 pages, and then decided I'm not supporting this industry anymore. It's like my perception of putting a line in the water and catching a fish that you needed to consume for your health was completely disconnected with what industrial fishing is about these days. And so that turned me off of that. And then probably a year after that, I watched Forks Over Knives. And it was the game changer for me because it, basically not only disavowed the notion that you had to have meat and dairy for our own health, but it was also the connection with the chronic diseases being diseases of choice based on what foods we're consuming. And so that was the the final straw that kind of got me started on this path.
And how many years ago was it that you kind of made that full transition?
Well, let's see. So the restaurant's we're in our ninth year, so it was probably like 12 years before that. And my career had been in the intelligence community, supporting the intelligence community. So all the black agencies, CIA, NSA, when you see enemy of the state, I was working in those places, and it was a pretty cool place to work on some of the biggest, hardest problems. And I started a company in that space after 9/11. And so I had my company for 10 years and sold my company in 2011. And that gave me the opportunity to see what was next. And I had lost a partner in 2009 to heart disease. Tony was 50 years old, and he died suddenly one evening from a heart attack. And I remember as the weeks went by, I remember, I had a conversation with my dad. Was there something that I could have done that would have prevented that from happening? And the response was, it was genetic. His dad had died of a heart attack. His mother died a couple of years later from heart disease. And so when I saw Forks Over Knives I think it was 2013 was when I saw that film, it was like an epiphany for me. And so I had time, and I like to take things that are new, competitive assets, and get them into operational capability. And so I ended up, we were talking about how small this community is. The intelligence community is very small, and it takes time to build reputation. And when I started in the plant-based community, I didn't have any background. I didn't know anybody, but I went on the holistic holiday at Sea Cruise, and I heard all the doctors. And so it was like an array of just one after the other of reinforcing the information from different perspectives. And so I ended up reaching out to Colin Campbell. I had the most in common with him, and he had gone to MIT to Virginia Tech. I graduated from Virginia Tech. He got married in the church that's just down the street from where I live. And so with that commonality, I basically asked for 30 minutes of his time and flew up to Pennsylvania and met him at the Summerfest. And instead of half an hour, we talked for multiple hours. And I started the conversation with, how can I help? How can I help get this message out? And he said, well, my son's working on a film, and this was the Plant Pure Nation film, where they were, I don't know if you've seen that, but they do this jump start with 10-day programs for people. So I helped the film get funded and finished. And during that time, I said, well, y'all are doing these things down in North Carolina. How about if I do one here? And so Colin agreed to come down, and we showed Forks Over Knives. I taught 45 people into changing their diet for 10 days. And I hired a nurse to do blood testing. So weight, blood pressure, lipid profile. Nelson drove a truck up with his food for 10 days. Whole Foods kept the food.
Yeah.
And so then we repeated that at the end of 10 days. And this was a healthy demographic of people. Most people there were no, what I would consider to be really sick people. People are on medications these days that are considered to be healthy, but across the board, people lost 5.5 pounds of weight loss, normalized blood pressure across the board, and we saw lipid drop by 20% average and as high as 33% into the younger women that were enrolled in the program. So it was kind of a shocker to me at how quickly things change. When you make a substantial change, dramatic change gives dramatic results.
Yeah.
And so at the end of this program, I started getting letters from people. I got like half a dozen letters where people would drop off a bottle of wine, or they'd say, this 10-day thing changed my life. And so it's like, in the 35 years I've been in the intelligence community, I've never heard that, even though there are maps still on the cities still on the map because of work, that was done in that space. It's like, I'd never heard that. And so it's like, okay, there's a need for this. So how can I make this happen? And so if you're familiar with the software engineering these days, it's agile, the agile approach where you know where you want to go and you do quick spins. So I found a restaurant that had been built out as a restaurant. I bought assets from a food truck that had gone out of business. I hired a guy, Pericles Silva had been at Whole Foods in Reston. He was a sports nutritionist and been through the McDougall program and did classes at Whole Foods. So I signed a lease in September. We opened in November, and we started doing Kickstart program in December. And so it was this very rapid approach to getting things started. And it wasn't pretty. It wasn't, the food wasn't that great, but it was what I wanted to do. And so tenacity and persistence, Pericles has become a chef now, and our food is great. But we've had, I think now we're over 1,700 people have gone through this 21-day program that we did, sort of partnered with PCRM, so Neil
Yeah.
Barnard's organization, and they do great work too. So it's been a great platform to bring people in. So Chuck Carroll, Neil Barnard, Colin Campbell, Dr. Esselstyn, Joel Furman. I think sort of an endless list of the rock stars have come and done lectures there, and we've created a community in the Fairfax County area, for people that are interested in optimizing health and nutrition. And it's not only health for humans, but health for the environment. So I bring a lot of speakers in. I have books, and it's really a fantastic place. We do dinner and a movie. I have multiple doctors that come in and do talks. Damian Mander from Game Changers will be there next month. Barnard will be back. So there's always stuff going on. I had AARP in there last week from state of Virginia. So we had a 3-month contract with them. So it's not just about feeding a meal. It's trying to change a life. It's how do you engage
Yeah.
with people, not only about why the food that you're eating tastes good, but why it can be beneficial for you and the biggest impact that you can make on things like climate change or your athletic performance or being around for your kids.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that. There's a lot to unpack here that I want to dive into. But first thing, I want to say I'm sorry for your loss. Um, I can relate to a certain extent. I lost my late partner to breast cancer over 3 years ago, and so as I was doing research on kind of like your story, there's a component you shared of kind of waking up and not having that person there, that energy in the house. And I related so much to that. It's the weirdest sensation that you just can never really get used to. So I just want to say I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Um, but I'd love to ask you, because you mentioned that when he passed away and you kind of asked, I think it was your dad that you mentioned that you asked, that's like, oh, that's just kind of heart disease. You can't do anything about it. So how did it feel for you to discover, I think the timeline was 4 years later, that like actually there was some control over being able to ultimately reverse or prevent heart disease? Like what was that moment for you to be like, damn, this could have been a very different outcome if we would have gotten this information earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole message is one of hope that it is something that we can control our outcome, right? And when you get that information, then you sort of feel empowered to share it with other people because um, I think going on the holistic holiday at Sea Cruise, which was continuing medical education credits for doctors, so there were a lot of doctors on board. And I remember after Caldwell Esselstyn spoke, and one of the doctors got up and he was sort of visibly angry and was like, this is kind of interesting. And his anger was about not learning this in medical school. He's like, why weren't we taught this in medical school?
Yeah.
And so, whether you think it's conspiracy theory that the knowledge has been suppressed, which there's probably aspects around that with big pharma. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's like, okay, now that we have this knowledge, that I have this knowledge, how can I be part of um, getting it out there, uh, facilitating the people that have the background, and then with the Kickstart, we have a YouTube channel right now with testimonials from people that have gone through the program and they've been able to keep a gallbladder or keep a kidney, avoid going through chemotherapy or have stents. It's just the human body, health is the norm. And when you accept that health is the norm and all of these conditions are based on inflammation, how do you make changes so you can get back to health as quickly as possible? And it's really interesting, kind of firsthand experience where you have people come in and they say, well, I'm healthy, but I want to improve. And yet they're on usually at least three or more medications, usually like a blood pressure or cholesterol medication, maybe metformin, but all, allergy medications, sleep medications. And it's like, this is not normal, right? This is not a normal state. And I think
Yeah.
like the injectables now, fat burning drugs,
I like Ozempic
we're
and
yeah
Wegovy and all
we're
these
we're
things.
experimenting with people like guinea pigs with some of these medications where some of the serious side effects are really starting to come out in some of the long term studies. And so, like, if you remember fen-phen, I think that was like a decade ago. It's sort of like a replay of that where so many people are getting sort of lifelong dependencies on this drug. If you stop it, then your weight comes back. And if you don't stop it, then you kind of lose an appetite not only for food, but for everything in life. So,
Yeah.
why would you do that instead of do something that's going to make you feel good and enjoy your life? And so
Yeah.
that's, we've incorporated all of these things into the program. When we started, it was primarily focused on plant-based nutrition, and we became organic. We went through the organic certification. It's like the more you learn about how food is produced, we have a seasonal menu that's from local farms, and so it was pretty big cost to go through the organic certification. Um, but it has a huge impact. Gluten intolerance is another thing that we experience with a large population now, and people aren't allergic to the gluten. They're allergic to what gets sprayed on the wheat or
Yeah.
what gets added in the food processing aspect. So, a lot of people say, well, I can go to Europe and eat the bread there without any problems. And so, how do you
I
make
love
food
Europe.
that's going to, yeah, it's crazy, right? It's like just a different way of going back to and I'm an engineer, and I think in my 20s, I always had ultimate faith in doctors and medications, right? Things from a lab or technology based solutions. And after reading Colin Campbell's book Whole,
Yeah.
and the complexity of the human body and the complexity of plants and nutrition, how nutrition is absorbed, it's like you can give people a pill and think it's going to change just one thing. It changes the whole system. And so there's always going to be side effects. And so the more that I've learned about that and the more that I watch people have such dramatic recoveries in such a quick amount of time, that's been like the best thing, best motivator that I could have imagined, for me and what we're doing at Green Fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
You brought up a few points. One was um, that people will come and say that I'm healthy, but they're still going to be on those cholesterol pills, on the blood pressure. They're still going to be on those injectables, which I find interesting how the standard of what someone considers healthy, it's like, hey, I'm only on a few of the drugs. I'm not on on all the drugs like these other people, right? But it's still people haven't experienced like a true level of health when you kind of change your nutrition. And I love the your sentence of, people are basically being guinea pigs with this Ozempic and Wegovy things. Like, who knows in 30 years from now, what the effects are going to be from people that choose to stay on this drug. It's going to be, and when ultimately changing your nutrition is so easy and so hard at the same time, right? Because that I feel like I'm sure you deal a lot with that with the people that go through the challenge, like that emotional connection to people have with food, that emotional relationship can make it harder for some people to be consistent with it. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, the second class that we teach in our program is about breaking food addictions. And, if you compare it to tobacco and alcohol, it's pretty much the same thing where some people will come in and they'll say, well, I'm going to do the program for 21 days and then I'll probably go back. And I'd say, well, were you a chain smoker? Have you ever been a chain smoker? And somebody said, yeah. It's like, well, would you go back to smoking a cigarette again after you quit? And they look at me like, no, it was hard to get through that. And it's hard to
Yeah.
stop alcohol if you're an alcoholic. And so the aspect around processed food now is designed to get people, if you've talked with Chuck Carroll, designed to get people to consume as many calories as possible. And it's sort of interesting that the food industry has recognized that these weight loss drugs need different solutions. So,
Yeah.
Nestle just came out with a brand of packaged food where it's high in plants and fiber, because
Okay.
when people have diminished appetites and consume less calories, their nutrition becomes more important. So you can't just eat empty calories and not get really sick fast. So your
Yeah.
food choices are even more important. So everything is always directing its way back to eating whole plant and mushroom foods.
Yeah, it's like it's such a patch solution type of framework because it's like, okay, we're going to give you this drug, but then these issues are going to arise. So now we have this little patch solution of Nestle coming out with some products or whatever, and then if you take that for long enough, there's probably going to be other issues with deficiencies, and then they just keep coming out with ways to kind of monetize the deficiency of kind of the initial issue. Um, yeah, it's such a, I get it, it's business, but it's so interesting to see how they're framing all of it, and just for normal people that aren't in that space, just like you eat whole food plant based, you don't have to deal with any of this stuff.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's. I think it's interesting that I've got my engineering background, and um, I think the food industry will keep doing what consumers want. Um, and when consumers recognize that you don't have to do these things, you really want to address the root cause. So um, if you have a car with an engine noise and you take your car to a mechanic and the mechanic gives you earplugs,
Yeah.
it's the same thing that happens when you go to a doctor's office, and it's basically turning out the light bulb on your dash that's saying you've got a problem with your engine, right? You're putting a piece of black tape over that component. And if your mechanic did that, you would lose faith in your mechanic in the same way that we should be losing faith with doctors that aren't having conversations with us about healing. They're having conversations with us about medications or surgery. So there's a George Washington University director of their medical school came out and did a lecture. He's gone through our Kickstart program. He's got 15 interns now on lifestyle medicine. And so I'm very hopeful with what I'm seeing happening, in that organization with, um, and as he became plant-based, he started having conversations with his patients where he's saying, well, there's a path you can go where it's very easy. I can write you a prescription and you can leave the office and be out of here in 5 minutes. And then you'll come back in a couple months and we'll adjust your medication to be a little bit higher dose. And we'll have that conversation on and on until potentially your liver or kidney will start to complain. And then we may need to add another medication to that mix.
Yeah.
Or I can, share what I've learned and how I've maintained my weight and increase my ability to run by making some lifestyle changes. And he'll say, well, it's really sort of up to you which choice you want. Do you want path A or path B? And, it's sort of interesting that people are interested in Path B. And when they try it, and if they do it right the first week, then people feel better. And that
Yeah.
quick feeling better, I think, is the hook that keeps people on track. And so that path of the process of helping people through that transition, I think, is incredibly important. And that's what's been sort of lacking out there. Is people, you see all the time, their kids go vegan and they maybe don't, they eat anything with a V on the, on the package, but they miss the fruits and vegetables and the, beans and grains. And so it's just vegan processed food, and it becomes unsustainable because they're, nutritionally deficient. So that's not the right path, right? But it's, the desire is there. So how do you provide this, structure and path? We've started working with the Defense Health Agency. We showed the Game Changers film there, I think like 4 years ago, to the Uniformed Services University and the Walter Reed Veterans Group. And every time we'd show it, there would be maybe 3 or 4 dozen doctors. And then they coalesced and they held a summit, I guess a couple months ago, and they came up with this, and maybe this is something you can add in later, but it's a document that's, it's a 70-page document, lifestyle and performance medicine, whole food, plant-based eating guide for war fighters and their families. So veterans, it's very exciting to me to see this ACLM-based document that was extremely well designed being promoted out to, what we would consider like the most rigorous profession, I think, from a physical fitness standpoint, in the country. So a lot of really cool things happening. I'm excited about.
Yeah, the ACLM conference is a beautiful organization. I think it's really powerful for doctors to go through those. And there's more and more people being certified, which is awesome. And I know, Dr. Clapper is doing amazing work in this space as well, kind of going to medical schools and educating students, because I feel like a lot of those doctors would have the same reaction as the one that was on the cruise ship with you, right? Getting frustrated. It was like, hey, we're here to serve people, we're here to help people, but we weren't taught these tools that ultimately are free for people to do, right? You still have to buy food and eat food. You might as well, purchase a different type of food. And so I'm curious for you, did you notice any changes when you kind of made that transition to eating whole food plant-based? Because it sounds like, again, I don't want to make an assumption, but if your husband was having a little bit of issues with his heart, was probably eating in a certain way. And if you guys were together, usually that's kind of reflective of the couple. So did you notice any changes for yourself as you leaned into eating more whole food plant-based?
Yeah, so we were actually engaged, and I was already on the vegetarian path, and he was a Navy pilot, and pilots tend to like to drink, and they don't exercise as much. They like to tell stories and smoke cigars, and um,
Okay.
he was from South Carolina, which, the favorite topic down there is what kind of barbecue is it? Is it the spicy kind or the vinegary kind? And so when we would go down there to visit, I would always stop at the grocery store in self-defense, so I would have something to eat while I was down there.
Yeah.
Um, and as I think what I found, it was interesting, that my health has always been good. I've never been on any of the medications that we were talking about, but I've had trouble sleeping. And I think, maybe 15 years ago, I started having bursitis in one of my shoulders, and it wasn't from an injury. This sort of a funny story. I went to an orthopedic doctor, and I said my shoulder's hurting and my elbow is hurting. And the nurse said, well, we can only see you for one thing. And so I wrote left arm. So I went in because my whole arm was like inflamed. And, I got a cortisol shot, and then I started physical therapy. And that was where the eye opening impact on the oil free was just entering my education. So when I went oil free, all of that pain just disappeared really quickly. And that's a thing that people don't know. Even olive oil is going to be high in omega-6. So if you're in an inflamed state, or if you're consuming a lot of almonds every day, they're extremely high in omega-6. So the imbalances that you get from consuming certain foods are going to create a reaction in your body that if you stop doing it, your body heals itself really quickly. And it's usually days to, a couple of weeks to help people feel dramatically different than they did when they walk in the door and before they had that knowledge. So it's been, and I would say as a restaurant, we've evolved. When I had no restaurant knowledge. So what I usually do, I interview 3 restaurant owners and, what would you do if you were going to open a restaurant again? And across the board, they all said, well, have your alcohol license on day one when you open for profit.
That's what I heard too.
And so we had a vegan and organic list of wine and beer. And in October, before I opened the restaurant, so a month before we were opening, I went out to McDougall's wellness program, John McDougall in Santa Rosa, and he was talking about nutrition, whole food, plant-based diet. And somebody said, well, what about alcohol? And he said, everybody knows alcohol is a known carcinogen. And I was thinking, I've never heard that. I went to college, and somehow that hasn't been in any of the health magazines that I've been in. And so it's like our brand is healthy people, healthy planet, and I'm not going to serve a carcinogen as on our part of our menu. So we 86 that menu and took away the profit motive, because the motive for the restaurant is to educate people around optimal health and nutrition. And so we have not yet been in the black, but the cost to operate the restaurant for me personally is sort of like the cost of a personal chef. So it benefits me, but it's my platform and the opportunity to subsidize what I see Department of Agriculture subsidizing, with the Farm Bill of, meat, dairy, and eggs. So, we're sort of doing our part in the Fairfax County area.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. When I'm in that area, I'm definitely want to come and check it out, and support, and for the people listening as well to kind of go and check it out. So I'd love to ask you, like, when you kind of learn about this information, you went on the cruise ship and you kind of had that, not that aha moment, because it felt like it came over an extended period of time. But I feel like from what you've shared and what I've researched, like you've pretty much jumped with 2 feet in, right? You kind of came in, supported the Game Changer, Eating Our Way to Extinction, which I actually wanted to ask you. Were you at the premiere in LA when they did Eating Our Way to Extinction?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
that
was
was
there
pretty
as
fun.
well.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a cool venue where they had all the the bubble rooms and everything. That was pretty
yeah,
fun.
yeah. That's where I met Rich Roll for the first time, James for the first time. Yes, that was awesome. So, like, saying you went both feet into kind of supporting all these big movements, what was kind of like your reasoning behind going so heavy in that direction after you just came out from basically an exit from your other company?
Well, so I've been on the board of the DC Environmental Film Festival. Um, gosh, maybe coming up on close to 10 years. And the Game Changers premiered there. They showed, an early version of the Game Changers. And so when I saw that, I had the opportunity to meet James Wilkes and a few of the other people that were involved with the film. And there was a lot of buzz about the Game Changers, when it first came out. And I think the backing by James Cameron and the fact that they were planning to make it more powerful than what I saw in the theater, which was pretty good, but not as good as the the final product. So I got on board as an EP primarily because film had inspired me. And so the more people that you can inspire, I think through different mechanisms, um, and I think Game Changers now has been viewed by, millions of people. It got in with Jackie Chan being one of the EPs. It got into the Asian market and has taken off in China. And so, I think it's really cool when you can, that it's a legacy of sorts, right? It's, film can be a really powerful thing. I think Game Changers was a fun film and, interesting. Eating Our Way to Extinction was harder to watch. I think I've seen that one maybe 3
Yeah.
times. And Game Changers I could watch over. Anybody new that comes into my path. And the thing about Game Changers that I really loved was the research. It took like 7 years to get that movie to the theaters. James did a phenomenal job of researching, like why, and it was the same experience I had at Green Fair, where when the 21-day Kickstart, it was 70 to 80% female coming into that market, willing to make a change,
Yeah.
and usually the males had a health scare or a female behind them. So it's like, why was that group more reluctant to come to the table? And so putting his finger on, well, you need role models in that space that are firefighters and bodybuilders and football players and special operations guys, uh, uh, football player to make it an approachable thing. And then
Yeah.
the ED section in the film, I think, was classic. That's like as soon as guys see that, they're ready to make a change and try it for a
Yeah.
while and see if it
The
works. So that
burrito
was
experiment.
yeah. So my niece is in her 20s and she's like, I just met this guy and he changed his diet because of Game Changers. And so it's like when I hear that kind of feedback, it's like that's really cool to hear that people watch one film and then they have an epiphany, much the same way I did with Forks Over Knives. So,
Yeah. Are you going to be involved in the second one that's going to be that you guys, what James is working on?
I looked at the concept and it was a little bit of a different focus. So I'm probably not. I'm still open to getting involved at different points. I'll probably staying in touch with how that's going.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so
Awesome.
there's so many people I think that are doing exciting things in this area now. Just in different ways. And Colin Campbell has been he's been really our true north through everything. I look around at people that are doing something without expecting any financial remuneration for that. And Colin is, he just turned 90 this year. He's just finished his, I think it's fifth book. And I think he's the one that just has always really resonated with me. My dad's 90 years old, and they were both, researchers. And so I appreciate we're Scottish backgrounds, share Scottish background similarities. So we tend to be bullheaded when we get an idea about something. You just want to dig in and uh, make things happen. So, Colin's definitely been that. I think he's been 67 years in cancer
Yeah.
research. So, yeah.
It's, it's incredible. I'd love to talk about the challenges that you're kind of running, right? Kind of so that those 21 days. I also saw that you did a 21-day study conducted amongst African Americans. So I'm curious as to like what was the result of that when you did that initial experiment?
Yeah. So let's see. Maybe 5 years ago, we had a Kickstarter that went through our program who had such great results. He wanted to give us a check from his foundation that was pretty significant. So I started the nonprofit, Green Fair Health and Wellness, to be able to facilitate um, people that wanted to support us in the educational aspect. So when I did the Veg Fest for 5 years, we did it through that entity. And when the pandemic hit in 2020, it was kind of a crazy time in the restaurant business as well as the rest of the world, where I think there was a lot of people operating from fear. And, for me,
Yeah.
after I think at that time we'd been almost close to 6 years in the restaurant space, and you're looking at what's going to happen with my staff and my customers. And so we were able to keep all our full time people. And um, what I started seeing emerging was a basic inequity in different populations around how COVID was hitting, particularly strong in the African American and Hispanic community. And so the nonprofit, we basically used the grant money that we had gotten to facilitate this. It was a 28-day focus on diabetes in African Americans. And we provided, it was the classes, blood testing, meals, and, basically community and coaching for 28 days. And we videotaped it. So I had basically, it was like a short documentary about this process, and sort of interviewing people before and after. And I remember one fellow served on a board with me, very well educated man, and he had left the board because of health reasons, and he had I think 4 different doctors at the end of the 28 days. At the beginning, he said, "I don't know what really to expect. I've never been on a plant-based diet before." And then at the end, he's like, my doctor said you're a new man, right? He's gotten off all these medications. And it's like, for him, it was an epiphany. He had been the ambassador in France. And so the French food is not that whole food, plant-based, friendly. So it was really eye-opening experience. And we went back to that group of people, and we did A1C again, like 3 months and 6 months. And I haven't written that up. I've been talking with people at one of the organizations that I work with about doing a case study, because we have so many long trials, drug trials of things. But the case studies can be really impactful, where you take a disease and you can not only show that you improve it, but you reverse it. When you can reverse something, like somebody has gallstones and they're ready to have their gallbladder removed, and 21 days later, their gallbladder is normal. And
Yeah.
doctors are unfamiliar with that concept. And so, so we've been doing the videotaping of, different testimonials in that area. Rheumatoid arthritis. You change your diet, 21 days later, all your pain is gone, and you're off of, maybe multiple strong pain medications, versus another woman I know that's had like 2 surgeries on her neck and surgeries on both of her hands, and still in crazy pains and a lot of medication. So this concept of healing, which is what I always thought doctors were programmed to do, but they're not trained to do that now. They're trained to diagnose and then treat with medications or procedures. And so it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's been really eye opening for me. I feel very blessed to have been recipient of the knowledge and time. People like Colin Campbell and Neil Barnard, and learn that information firsthand, and then be able to share it, with people.
Yeah. And I feel like the culmination of all that knowledge and all that experience has been put into your 21-day Kickstarter program. So I just want to talk about that for a little bit. What is the structure and the framework of that for people that would want to go through it?
Yeah, so we try to make it really easy for people. My cousin decided to give up cigarette smoking, and it was sort of after I had a stern talk with him one day about who was going to take care of his mother if he got lung cancer, and so he stopped smoking. But what he did was he called Veterans Administration, and they sent him. They said, "You want to stop smoking?" They sent him a pack of nicotine patches. He got a coach. They were shipping him daily videos to watch. So it was a really high level of engagement that tapered off over time, but it helped him through that hump. So we're trying to do somewhat of a similar thing where for 21 days, you don't have to think about food. You just eat what we give you. And we're teaching you how and why to do it on your own. So the first class, and we've evolved it quite a bit, we're always integrating the best of what we learn in um, sleep, exercise, incorporating intermittent fasting. So we do meals, two meals a day, um, organic, whole food, plant-based, plant mushroom-based meals that are freshly prepared. And then the before and after blood testing, which is optional. So we teach the lifestyle medicine the first class. We have a whole class on food addiction and breaking food addiction, sort of how it is developed, what addiction actually is, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if you remember um, in the 60s, Philip Morris, I think all the cigarette manufacturer CEOs got lined up, and one by one the Congress, does your product cause addiction? No, 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 down the line. And so what they looked at was how they defined addiction, which is actually true. It's any product or thing that some people do repetitively that they find hard to stop. And so you can look at that at like video games or,
Caffeine.
gambling, or, I mean, there's all array of things. And the food industry has learned very quickly from the tobacco industry how to incorporate the brain imaging, how to light up places in your brain to make you think you're having like a pumpkin pie spice when there's not any nutmeg or pumpkin or cinnamon or any of those ingredients in there. It's all chemical based, but it has that synthesis that gives us that that feeling. So the food industry has gotten increasingly sophisticated at bypassing and leveraging our natural desire to store food for the time of famine that never comes.
Yeah.
And then we teach label reading and meal planning, meal prep in the last class. So it's 4 classes, 21 days, and the goal is to have people have success in feeling better. Usually people are sleeping better, skin is better, and they'll get off usually decrease or get off blood pressure medication the first week, reduce A1C medication the first week. Lipid profile usually is 20%, so they can talk about getting off of that. And usually the doctors will do it, but they need to have a commitment that the patient's going to stay on it.
Yeah.
So almost everything reverses in a short time.
And is this something that people have to live in your neck of the woods to do, or is it something that's potentially online where the food is shipped? Like, how does it work?
During the pandemic, we did the classes online and found that it was more difficult. It's you don't have the same connection, and I think there's a lot of people that are doing things that are online. And then the thing that I've learned about food is our whole food system is designed for high shelf life, which shortens the human life. It's like the longer the shelf life, the shorter your life. And so anything I was one of the, not to disparage, but Purple Carrot, I was one of the beta customers for that. And when I got the box in the mail, it was like, oh my gosh, this is like an environmental disaster. So I don't want to be part of something that makes the problem worse. So Nelson Campbell's doing like his meal starter kits, which is basically the ingredients that you mix with vegetables to produce a meal. So that's better than shipping produce and, um, refrigerated food around in huge containers. So and we've had people that have come and stayed in town for 21 days and done the program, and so it's possible to do that. It's the cost is less than $800 for 21 days. So compared to some of the programs that are out there, I think where people go away, the benefit to people that live in the area that do it is you're making these changes while they're living their life. They're living in their home, they're with their family, they're at their job. So they're changing while they're in this entrenched environment. And if you go away and lose weight and then you come back, you're immersed with the same temptations, I think, and protocols that you had, before you went away. So that's a bit, and we allow people to bring their significant other or their support person at no cost to the program. So if somebody's coming in for health, then maybe we can interest the other person and, making a change along with them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then there is something to it, right? Like you get out of your environment and you don't learn to kind of make these changes with the daily stressors of your day-to-day life. There is something to kind of going somewhere and not having anything else going on while you do it and then coming back and not knowing how to navigate these scenarios, not having had to deal with I really want to order vegan pizza tonight and have a glass of wine versus like, hey, I should eat this food. And I feel like, doing it where you're living is really valuable because then you have to navigate those scenarios and you have the support while you're doing it.
If you ever want to come out and sit in on any of the classes or, it would be fun because it's the thing that is so cool for me is every day that I'm in the restaurant, there's usually at least one person that comes in and tells us how we changed their life. And it's, there's not a price on that. It's just, it's where I think most doctors go to medical school with that expectation. And, sort of unfortunately, I think with the impact of the pharmaceutical, there's always a place for drugs and medication, but usually not for chronic things. So, I fell down and banged my head a couple of weeks ago, and I needed a doctor, and I needed all the technology, and I'm very appreciative to have a great medical system in our space. But being that day to day dependent on it, that's not a good plan.
No, for sure. Yeah, it does come in handy in those situations of emergency, but when it comes to things that can be prevented, it's definitely a different conversation. I have two more questions that I'd love to ask you. And they're kind of outside a little bit of the realm of necessarily eating whole food plant-based. The first one is I've had the opportunity to have like a few owners of vegan restaurant on the podcast. And, they talk about the economy, how it's different and how it's becoming a little bit harder for kind of plant-based restaurants. So if there are any plant-based restaurant owners that are listening or people that are intrigued in starting their own plant-based restaurant, what are pieces of advice that you would give to them? Because you've been running it for 9 years, you made it through the COVID years, you're able to keep your staff, which is very impressive. So like, what are some pieces of advice that you would be able to pass off to those current owners and future owners?
Yeah, so I think I've had maybe like 5 startups now, and the two key things I think for any startup that you're going to do to be successful in business, one is to focus on a point of pain. It's like, what do people want and what do people need? And sometimes they don't even know what they want. So what do they need? And I think, like Jeff Bezos with Amazon, we didn't know we needed an online ordering company for everything. And, Apple, you didn't know that you needed a phone that would be a GPS system and a camera, right? It's how do you anticipate what people need? So this growing state of ill health is something I think we can definitely focus on. The second thing is a differentiation. It's how do you differentiate yourself away from every other business in the area that's offering similar things. And that's where you move from a cost proposition, which is coupons and low prices, into something that's a more elevated value like good health and community. So creating, a different type of environment that it's like why Starbucks was successful in selling, $5 cup of coffee, right? It's an environment that makes people feel better about themselves. They go in. So it's differentiation. I mean, those are, and then probably the third thing I would say is, you have to be capitalized. So you're not like, don't try to expand too quickly because that's another thing is, when people would say, how long have you dreamed of opening a restaurant? For me, it would be like, well, since May. So it wasn't a dream. It was more like, this is what I'm going to do. But for a dream of a restaurant, there's a great book. It's called 10-Year Plan. That I don't know if you read it. It's a book about these guys that wanted to open a restaurant. It's not even a plant-based. It's a healthy restaurant chain, and it took them 10 years to get to opening. So it's like if you want to do something, it doesn't matter how long you do it. Just have a plan to do it and make progress, incremental progress toward that plan every day, whether you do it in your spare time or while you're out running, thinking about it. But, it's like follow your passion, but have a plan.
Beautiful.
So,
And ultimately that applies to every other business. I was just trying to relate it to my businesses. And I was like, yeah, those would work with all those. Do you know who wrote the 10-year plan? Because I feel like that'd be useful even outside of restaurant.
yeah, actually, they had one of the speakers. It's if you search on 10-Year Plan restaurant, it'll come up on Amazon. And it was I went up to the CIA in Hyde Park. This is not the other CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, and they've been
Oh,
doing
that's
a
not what I
program
was thinking.
for 4 years now on global plant forward for restaurants. So it's really focused at leadership in that industry. And I went out, I guess, the first time in Sonoma and then Hyde Park. And the fellow that wrote that book was up at Hyde Park. And they had it was a chain of restaurants that they evoked. It was sort of more like along the line of like True Foods Kitchen, that sort of
Yeah.
more helpful than the Chick-fil-A sort of
Yeah,
model.
yeah, for sure. That's where I
But,
met my wife. That was our first date at True Food Kitchen. It's a good
okay,
restaurant.
very cool.
Um, last question for you. This one has nothing to do with veganism. I'm genuinely curious as to what got you into the intelligence space when you started your first business. Because did you have a background in that? Because you did engineering, so I'm curious as to what made you step into that space. I think you mentioned post 9/11.
Yeah. So did you ever see the movie Sling Dog Millionaire?
I think
It's
so.
about some people in India and they have experiences, and then one of them ends up on a game show later in life, and like all of these things that happened to him gave him the information to win the game show.
Yeah.
It was like his whole life had prepared him for that moment where they ask him like these bizarre questions and he like knows the answer to it. So my life has sort of been like that. When I got an electrical engineering degree, I went to work for a defense contractor, TRW, in the 80s, and I was writing software to track Russian submarines based on their signature profile with acoustic array processors. And then I moved from there. I got a graduate degree. I went to work for Hewlett Packard in the first days of computers. I went to work for Cray Research, one of the supercomputer companies. It was, I sold a $32 million supercomputer to the National Cancer Institute. And
Wow.
so it was working at senior levels, taking something that was new into institutional environment and making it operational. And so, I did that at Silicon Graphics, and then Teradata data warehousing was pretty much the same thing. How do you help somebody solve a problem with a new technology and remove the obstacles to allowing it to happen? So all of my days in technology were uh, a benefit after when I have a tragedy in my life, I started a business. I was in New York City on 9/11, and I was 2 blocks from the Trade Towers and watched the American
Wow.
Airlines fly into the tower and watch dozens of people fall. And that week, I quit my job and I started a company called Mosaic that I had for 10 years. And we put the first cloud computer at CIA. We worked on we actually designed the architectural framework for the IC um, intelligence community integrated technology enterprise. So it was how do you allow the agencies to actually share information together? So And it was a hard problem. It was a crazy hard problem, and it's crazy hard problem to get plant-based eating into the American population. But there's,
Which
so
one's
it's like,
harder?
yeah, everything I do, it's kind of interesting. It's like you hit a brick wall and you kind of back up and you try it a different way. And, I think it's like tenacity and persistence, right? And you want to make a change in this. And so what's the optimum? And usually for me, it's like, how do you do it at high levels with influential people? So
Yeah,
I lead one intelligence group now, and I think maybe like 30. I've got like 30% of the group now eating plant-based meals. So it's the CIA, CIO, DIA, CIO, Assistant Secretary of Defense have all gone through a 21-day program. So I'm bringing a lot of the senior leaders from our national security space
that's beautiful.
into the plant-based community.
Yeah, because those are high impact people. They're leaders in their space, and so people will look up to them. So like, hey, this is what you're doing. Um, okay, well now I'm curious. I have another question that popped up for you. So it feels like there's like 4 or 5 different types of people in the world. There's people that create something out of nothing. So they see a problem and they have to create a solution within themselves, which is kind of, I think, what you do. And then there's people that go, well, other people can do it, therefore I can do it. And then there's people that are like, well, it worked for other people, but I don't think it can work for me. And then there's other people that think I can't do that, even if other people have done that. I think you're the first type of person, which is there's a problem and I will make my own way to kind of solve the problem. And you mentioned kind of pulling back and look at it from a different way. Do you have like a framework that you use for yourself of when there is a problem? Like you step back? Do you have like, okay, I need to look at it from this perspective, at this perspective? Like, do you, I'm curious if you have a framework or if you've ever analyzed how your brain tries to come up with solutions to problems.
Um, I mean, so there's like the engineering method, right? You come up with a hypothesis that this could work, and then you try it, and you may see some aspect works, and then you try it a little bit different way. And so it's always, if you're comfortable, you're not learning, right? So you always have to be innovating some new thing. And there's sort of another approach, like from a customer set of how to make change. And in the agency, CIA, if you're trying to make change in a country from a propaganda standpoint, there's a concept of um, infiltrate, align, and escalate. So it's like you get into your new environment, you make friends, and then you shift thinking, right? It's established that you're, an intelligent, thoughtful person, and you sort of put ideas out there that can seed the population into thinking a different way. So, sort of those two approaches. I think the quick spirals of business. It's we did a 10-day program, we did a 21-day program, we did a 28-day program, we did it in person, online, we did a kiosk at a metro station, we've done like multiple farmers markets. I've done programs in different companies. So it's like, how do we do videotapes, um, it's just always tried to innovate and find a different way. And it's partnerships too. I mean, I don't. I'm almost more like Elon Musk is kind of interesting because he's didn't design the rockets himself. He took a lot of the technology that had been designed by NASA and then figured
Yeah.
out how to enable it in today's environment. And so everything, I mentioned Colin Campbell and Dr. Esselstyn and Neil Barnard, 35, 40, 60 years in this space. So everything I'm doing is, James Wilkes with Game Changers, so I'm leveraging the pieces that other people have put out there, successes that they've had to, and even Green Fair, it's about the team of people that I have, that we've been able to keep our staff, so it's focusing on the people that you work with, your customers, the environment, the supply chain, and finances are sort of last in my book. It's like if you lead with finances, you'll never be ahead.
Yeah.
So,
It leaves you
it's
feeling
sort of
miserable too.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
what's the value proposition? What are you walking away with that you feel good about at night?
Yeah. Nah, for sure. And I feel like we've all been there at one point. If you haven't, it just leaves you feeling empty and unfulfilled at the end of the day if you're just going for the money. But if you're going for the mission and the core values, you just feel different. You just feel good. Like you're doing something great. You're excited to show up every single day. Yeah.
And I'll share one more thing, before we end. But um, on the topic of retirement, when you sell a company, people are like, "Oh, are you going to retire after this?" And it's like that word sort of is not in my vocabulary, right? It's like because there's so many things that I'm interested in, uh, that are opportunities to engage and make a difference. So it's I think always keeping the light burning is like one of the fourth legs of the stool. Dean Ornish talks about is how do you stay active and engaged and
Yeah.
passionate about something where you're curious and you're learning and you're working with smart people and you have a purpose for your life. So that's the whole thing about the plant-based eating is it gives us hope for a better world and definitely healthier people in the world.
Yeah. So let me just kind of end on this last question. What is something that you wish people knew, um, that, or like a question that you never get asked, and that's something that you would like to pass along to the listener to kind of wrap up the podcast, or just something you really want people to know that is not like an obvious statement that we already said.
Well, I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, but the thing that I think is not in people's, it's not apparent to people how quickly their body changes when they stop causing harm. It's like when you have a cut
Yeah.
on your arm and it heals by itself. You don't have to do any intervention. It's like our bodies heal ourselves. But if you're cutting your arm every single day, it's not going to heal. And that's what we're doing with our food. And as soon as you stop doing that, people have really dramatic results. And for me, that's been the most fascinating, um, stupefying thing is how humans are actually really pretty hard to kill. It takes us a long time before we
Yeah.
actually show signs of sickness. And with all the medical interventions, they can keep us going for a pretty long time. Um, and so yeah, it's like just uh, stop causing harm. That's the isn't that what the Hippocrates thing is like? At first, do no harm. Or, that's what when you recognize that, then you have the power to change your life, change your own life.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, beautiful, Gwen. I want to say a massive thank you for taking the time to jump on the podcast, share your story, share your knowledge. I've learned a lot. It's a very exciting conversation. Very often can I combine Colin Campbell and Elon Musk in a conversation. So this was great for me. um, and also, I will put all your links down below for the people that are interested in 21 Day Kickstarter program. They want to watch your resources, check out your podcast, your YouTube channel, and all of these things, and all your information. So be sure to go and check that out, everyone. Thank you for listening to the episode, and we will see everyone in the next one. Bye.
Thanks, Maxie. Thanks for having me.